I think, now he wants to do
it's
other
happening.
debates.
It's happening in
Yes, on 19th of April in Toronto. Now he wants to do it with me in London for BBC. More,
I see.
I accepted only one because first he rhetorically is pretty good. So we made a precise deal. I set my conditions. First, it's not even a debate. There is a neutral moderator. We both checked that he is neutral. And the moderator introduces us, then each of us speaks for half an hour, presenting his theory case, not addressing each other, just presentation. Then each of us answers the other in 10 minutes, and then it's Q&A with the public. Because what I wanted to avoid is this lively exchange where maybe he is even better. He's very good at this Muslim style of, don't use this, Muslim style of, in the sense that he knows first, he gives you some 10 books, but you know that biological study proves this, proves that, and then he insists on that, and of course you don't know all those books, no? This is one, I wanted to make it this neutral.
So he's saying that the debate will be 30 minutes, then segments of 10 minutes. Now I hope there'll be some back and forth, not just 10 minutes, and then they're done. Hope it'll be a bit more. But yeah, he's trying to avoid the back and forth. He's trying to avoid actual debate. I mean, or even just a conversation. It would be great to see them have a conversation, but on the one hand, I admire his honesty, that he's being so upfront about that he really is afraid to debate Peterson. And he says that Peterson can use this tactic of sort of lighting fires all over the place that you have to then come and extinguish, like mentioning many different books that Zizek has not read. But I think this is a tactic that's commonly employed by people on the far left, Marxists, communists, etc., postmodernists also. Right, they might reference all kinds of books in some kind of attempt, and then say, well, we don't have the time to go through all the theory. You just need to read the book. Very common. Whereas people on the right will tend to make the argument. They might cite data and sources, and Peterson does that a lot. Talks about data related to psychology. So I don't see him saying, oh, you have to read Nietzsche or Jung or whatever to understand the world that you live in. Of course, he references them often, but he doesn't say that they're necessary. It's not a required part of any argument that I see him make. This really is something that we see over and over again. I mean, if you look at YouTube these days, it is dominated with people who are not far left, okay? It's dominated... I mean, they're labeled as being on the right, but many of them, take Sargon of Akkad, even Count Dankula says he's on the left or center left. He also says he's libertarian, though. So I'm not sure he's totally sure about where he wants to be on the political spectrum. But Jordan Peterson as well says he is center left or just left. And mainly, I think that comes up in that they support a lot of social programs. So whereas I listen to people like Peterson, I agree with being against political correctness and some of these social and cultural things. When it comes to economics, I'm often in disagreement. Or I'll watch Jimmy Dore, who is a supporter of Bernie Sanders, and I really enjoy watching Jimmy Dore. When it comes to economics, we completely disagree. Complete opposites, but that doesn't stop me from enjoying his content. And I like Jimmy Dore. I mean, I totally disagree on economics, but there's so much that he says that I do agree with. I also think his narrative is a little simplistic, always just saying that the motive for war is the profit of the military-industrial complex, but he might be right about that, so I respect it. What we see over and over again on YouTube or Twitter, in the public in general, is people on the left not willing to debate and have a conversation with people on the right. I just saw the other day some study that said that Democrats were 3 times as likely to unfriend someone on Facebook because of their political views as Republicans. This really goes in line with what you see a lot of people saying, and I feel also, is people on the left are making emotional arguments, whereas, and you do see a little of that on the right. But more often I see people on the right who are willing to sit down, have coffee, have a beer, whatever, talk things out, and agree to disagree and be friends after. Whereas people on the left want to, a lot of them, want to feel morally superior. They bring a lot of emotion into the conversation, and they're looking for this source, this reason to be angry and outraged about the stuff that you're saying. Here's the actual article that refers to the survey, and it's on fortune.com. Oops. Okay, so Democrats are 3 times more likely to unfriend you on social media, survey says. This was from 2016. I'm sure there were a lot of surveys like this that showed similar results. And I don't think many people are surprised by this. Now, to be fair, they did lose the election, but if things had been reversed, or take when Obama won, you didn't have the same effect. Now, I will say Donald Trump is a bit special, right? Probably in a bad way, but yeah, so they were unhappy about that, as we can see. But I'm not trying to say that this is right here, that this is good or bad necessarily. I'm just saying that people on the left are the ones that right now usually aren't willing to have a conversation, at least not as much as people on the right. To sit down, have coffee, have a beer, whatever, and talk things out. So just making that point. A lot of what you see on the left is just this searching. They'll find a person who has right-wing views, and they will search through tons and tons of what they said to find one thing that's where they can just label this person as a bad person, and then try to discredit them forever after that. You saw this recently. They tried to do this with Candace Owens, and it did not make sense. Ironically, Zizek himself said some pretty crazy stuff about Adolf Hitler. Take a look.
When you talk about embracing the hopelessness, do you mean, as some have suggested, that you're urging revolt, that you're actually advocating violence?
No, wait a minute. I know these statements brought me into a lot of trouble.
A lot of your statements have brought you into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, but I'll
come on
care.
to LGBT later.
I'm resigned to it, but just read carefully what I said. For example, and this was the most problematic statement, when I said the problem with Hitler was that he wasn't violent enough. You can imagine people.
That's pretty problematic.
Yeah, but you know what is then second part of the same statement? In the sense in which Gandhi was more violent than Hitler. It's clear that I'm not talking about killing, physical violence. I'm talking about radical change in social system. And my point is that...
Why didn't you say that then? I mean, is there a problem with the words you're using?
Because in this way I would have watered down the point that change, social systemic change, in some sense is violent. Today we not only get physical violence. Isn't it, for example, a bankruptcy of a big company where millions even lose job and so on? They can experience this as an extremely violent thing.
So this is what pretty much every Marxist or far-left person has to do. They have to confuse the word violence, basically. Because they want to say that employment is violence, exploitation. The whole Marxist argument is that your employer steals your surplus value from you when they employ you. So this is a conflation of what violence is. It's concept creep. It's deception, because violence is simple. It's physical coercion, right? It's quite simple. Now, deception can be a gray area, because if you deceive someone and you make them do a whole lot of things that they wouldn't have done normally, that can be a gray area, I think. Okay, because it's similar to coercion. But to say that offering a job, any job, is violence, and for someone to take that job is violence, is a little crazy. Now he says that big banks breaking up and people losing their jobs, isn't that a kind of violence? Not really. When you analyze it, I mean, the job that the bank was providing was not a human right to begin with. Those people could have gotten jobs elsewhere. It was mutual exchange. It was not coercion. And then they lost this thing. They knew that they might lose their job at some point. Especially going into banking, you know that the financial sectors sometimes collapse. So, is that violence? No. If you want to, but this is the trick. This is one of the tricks that they do. They want to say that that's violence. They want to say that building factories and employing people, that this is violence, stealing, etc. This is their argument. This is fundamentally the Marxist argument right there. So that's something that he has to do. Now about the whole Hitler thing. I mean, just imagine if someone on the right had said something as crazy as that Hitler was not violent enough. Yeah, I mean, it scares me because there's this assumption that the Nazis were right-wing. The Nazis were socialists, right? National socialists, and people are like, no, it's just a name, just like North Korea is Democratic Republic of Korea or something like that. Well, North Korea, I mean, they think at least they used to be communists, so communism is meant to be democratic, basically, right? So they at least thought that what they were doing was democratic on some level, or they pretended it, depending on how you argue that. But for the Nazis, I mean, socialism is government control of the means of production. I mean, obviously they believed in government control of the means of production. And Mussolini considered himself to be a socialist. The Nazis considered themselves to be socialists. They were a workers' party. Now, then people say, well, okay, there was fighting between communists and Nazis and fascists. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that they're all that different. I mean, Shiites and Sunnis fight, Protestants and Catholics fight, brothers fight. I mean, yeah, you can be very similar and fight. Americans had a civil war. There's been many civil wars all over the world. So, yeah, just the fact that they fought doesn't mean they're not in the same category politically. Fundamentally, yes, they're socialists. Then people say, well, they're racist and Republicans are racist or something like that. It was about racism. Well, back then, the left, the Democrats, were clearly the party of racism. So, you know, Dixiecrats South and all that stuff. So that is just another point in favor of them being on the left. Now, I want to show you this article from the New York Times. So this is an article from the New York Times, January 7th, 1934. Now, I want to read this, and I'm talking about the issue of whether the Nazis were left-wing or right-wing. Classless German society is Nazis' final objective. Berlin, December 28th, by mail. Announcing the last phase of the Nazi revolution in Germany. The party's ingenious propaganda apparatus has chosen Kultursozialism as its weapon in crushing society as a last fragment of liberalistic class distinction. Class distinction, which separated brain workers from manual laborers, rich persons from less well-to-do fellow citizens, is being radically wiped out. So they're wiping out class distinction. Is that so different from communism? Isn't that one of the goals of communism? And you'll often see that Nazis were anti-capitalist. Now, they were socialists. Okay, so it's an important distinction between the communists and socialists. is that socialists want the government to control industry, whereas communists ultimately, at least in rhetoric, they want the workers to control industry, right? Which is not really possible in a sense. Somebody needs to be managing the overall top-down strategy, I think. So whether workers can do that efficiently, say by voting on things, in some cases maybe it can be done. But that can also be done in a free market. So, okay, so yeah, that's an important distinction between socialism and communism. They want state control of the system, but they are trying to get rid of classes. That's what they say. It was the National Socialist Party. So, okay, the Reichs, I don't know how to pronounce that, Reich, their culture chamber, and the, quote, power through joy movement, the latter controlling the off hours of the working population, including the employers, are the two backbones in the fight against society. It is Adolf Hitler's idea to make Germany a country of equals, from the chancellor down to the last workman. Ranks and titles are taboo in private life. So, if the right is sort of the conservative, let's say the ruling class at its worst, it is conservative society, it's often religious, Christian, Catholic, whatever. Does this sound like it's coming from the right, conservative society that doesn't want big change in society? They're talking about a revolution here where people no longer have rank and title. That is not conservative. That is just classical left wing right there. And as to the question of whether they were socialists or not, I mean, not only in name were they socialists, but in practice they were. I mean, obviously, the Nazis and the fascists, they wanted to control everything. That is government control of industry. So that's just obviously apparent. There's other things like the racism, making abortion legal, and gun control. They all have left-wing points of view, at least for the time. So it's not crystal clear that the Nazis were right-wing, but everyone assumes that they were. But I'm just pointing this out because it's sort of creepy to see that people just excuse these kinds of comments when they happen on the left. It's very hypocritical. So somebody who's a socialist or communist making those kinds of comments about Hitler might be a bit concerning.